Hey, my name's Dan Adcock. I'm the technical seed agronomist for Winfield United and the genetic lead for the Eastern U.S. So kind of what we're going to talk about here is how do we get the genetics and how do we make in-season decisions to go with the genetics that we're getting. Done. Just that easy. I'm going to start with a little bit of a story. I was kind of tell you why I like talking in the southern portion of the Corn Belt versus the northern. I had a chance to go up to Davenport, Iowa this week and talk, and it was with a group. I knew a couple of them but hadn't spent a lot of time with them. And their seed lead, I've known her for quite a while, but we haven't been in a lot of meetings together. And so we talked a little bit. We're about 20 minutes into this meeting, and she's kind of over there smirking, and I'm looking at her, so I stopped the meeting. I was, what are you smirking about? She said, when you first started talking, that southern drawl, she said, it was kind of cute. She said, now it's just getting old. She said, you're going to have to start talking a little faster. So, but either way, it was a good meeting, but I do like traveling around, get to see a lot of different things. So I'm going to start by asking some questions. How many people in this group have started farming in the 70s or before? One. Well, you got a couple. Two, couple. How about the 80s? A couple more. How about the 90s? We're still getting some hands, so how about 2000s? A couple. So what's if you think back to whatever day that was that you started, what is the single biggest thing, or even if it's a couple things, what's something that has really changed how you do business, or just changes in general that happened from when you started until now? Herbicide traits, herbicide resistant crops, you're saying? Yep. What else? So that would kind of fall into the technology or biotech side of things. What else?
Stress tolerance.
Stress tolerance, so it's been bred into the crop a little bit better. I'd agree with both of those. Anything else?
150 bushel corn was great when I started.
Yeah. Yep, and it's still good in some places. Anything else? Population, and that's all come, and what I'm getting at is we kind of touched on the technology of it or the access to information, the fact that we can look at a ton of different hybrids and say, all right, the populations have come up, we need to, and I think that technology, and I got so much stuff in my pocket now, I don't even know where my phone's at, but I usually pull it out. Here it is. We've got more computing power in our pocket today than what the Apollo missions had to go to the moon. So if you think about that, it's a pretty staggering deal. And where I'm going with that is that our access to information is incredible. So the second part of that is, think back to whenever you started farming, there were times when, say the neighbor quit and he said, Farmer Jones come up to you and said, hey, I'm going to give up, I'm going to retire, would you like to farm my stuff? You said, yeah. He had 6 fields. You went over there, and how'd you handle it? We kind of went and did it all at the farm level, right? Wherever we went, we just managed everything at the farm level. Well, then that kind of transitioned into say, well, he had 2 fields that had a boatload of manure on them because that's where the hog barns were at, and I should probably treat those a little different. He's got 2 in the bottoms. They act a little different. I should probably treat those a little different. So now we're at the field level, not just the farm level. And that transition in the late 80s, mid 90s, what happened? What happened technology-wise that we were able to start getting into the grid and a little more accurate management there? Launched a bunch of satellites, right? The GPS satellites came in, so we were able to grid sample, spread off of that, do multiple things using that data. In today's world, we're literally doing it by the foot. And you're doing it on the fly. There's a lot of people that are not just changing population on the fly, but they're changing, your nitrogen rates, your pH rates, your P and K, whatever it might be. Even sometimes the variety or hybrid you're planting can be changed by the foot as we go. So my point to that is we've come a long way, right? There's a lot of things that we're doing, and it's because our technology's gotten better, our equipment's gotten a lot better. So the challenge here, and what this stops about is our in-season management decisions, similar to what Jim was talking about, do they match the capability that we've got technology-wise? Are we taking advantage of that access to information that we've got at any given time? And that's kind of what we want to spend a little bit of time about, that there's a dollar figure associated with it. And we want to challenge you guys a little bit to use, not to change what you're doing. That's really not the goal on it. But what we want you to understand is that there's so much information that can help you make decisions don't be afraid to ask for that information. And I'm going to go through a couple of the examples of the stuff that we have as Winfield United and in turn Superior gets out of it. So where you're sitting right now is an answer plot. You heard Jim allude to it just a little bit, the 6 million data points. That's what he's alluding to. Those data points all come out of replicated plots just like that. So where you're sitting right now is actually just the demo. This is kind of the touch it, feel it, rip it, dig it up portion of it. But if you turn and look in the back there where the weather station's at and then off to the side, that's where all the research at. So there's very few of us that actually spend much time back there, but that's what generates all the data. And I want to break it down into a couple sections and kind of talk about what we're doing. So I want to touch on fungicide first. And Jim did a good job kind of touching on this, but I want to dive just a hair deeper. So what we do out here is we take not just the Croplan products, but basically all the products that Superior has access to. So we've got the NK line, the Brevant line, the DeKalb line, the Croplan line, and we test all of them in the same manner. And specifically to the fungicide, we take that and we've got two strips, same exact lineup, and we'll put fungicide on one set, not on the other. And what that does is it forces us to get a variable yield. So it forces us to get a delta. There's a high and there's a low. In 2020, the fungicide results that we got. So Jim was talking about everything we'd ever had, but I want to talk about specifically 2020. And the range was a little over 10 bushels in 2020. So that's still a fairly substantial spread when you're looking at it. But the important part of this is, and he mentioned this, we had a hybrid in 2020 that averaged 3.9 bushels. So was that your best spend of that dollar is the point we're making. Versus one, and I've got the numbers broke out a little bit here, the high end of that was 25.3. So when you start to look at that and do the math on where we're at today, you know, at say just 550 corn, you know, you're talking a difference of about $120 simply by saying I needed it on this particular hybrid instead of everything across the board. And I get it, right? When we go to start making management decisions like that, specifically fungicide, what do we kind of count on? Helicopters, airplanes, trying to get all that lined up. So when it's go time, we tend to just say, yep, here's my maps. Go do it. I would never in a million years sit in front of you guys and tell you to not put fungicide on a crop. I'm just saying that as you're making management decisions, if you know you've got a product that falls into this camp, that's probably one that should get prioritized, maybe even at the planning level. So you know you can get in and get an airplane to it or get a helicopter to it. Make sure that the one that tends to be on this side of it is the one tucked back into the woods, that they're going to probably fight you a little bit on to do that. So, and to Jim's point, there are occasions where we can take the money saved off that and put it into something else. It doesn't matter to me what. I'm just saying that there are different options. You guys are well aware of that. So the flip side of this is the nitrogen by hybrid. We do the exact same studies out here with all the partner brands, so the Brevant, the DeKalb, the NK, the Croplan, and we do a very limited, well, I shouldn't say very limited, but we limit the amount of nitrogen we put on that side of the test strips. Here it tends to be around 140 to 150, but it's enough, but it's not overwhelming it. The other side of it, we'll put about 300 pounds on, and we're not here to say, you know, you need to do it by, you need to increase your nitrogen by 10 pounds or by 50. It's to say, we want to know which hybrids, specifically by hybrid, should I spend an extra dollar of nitrogen on? Or are there some that maybe shouldn't or don't respond as much? So by putting an extra 150 pounds of nitrogen, we're forcing a yield variant, right? So, and it happened. If you look at it, it went from 19.8 to 97, so that's about 78 bushel difference. So believe it or not, there was a product in there that by putting an extra 150 pounds of nitrogen on, we only recouped, we recouped less than 20 bushels out of that. So that's probably not the spin you were wanting to get out of that extra. So this is, I'm starting to kind of build a picture, right, of that. This in-season management thing is tedious. A lot of work goes into it, but the guys at Superior have access to all this data, and it's not just, you know, the fungicide and nitrogen. Those are the big hitters, right? Jim talked about it. You guys are all well aware of that. Next to weather, nitrogen is the number one thing you can spend money on. Fungicide is quickly coming towards the top of that. Hybrid by hybrid, we're able to kind of place that as we go. So the next part is I want to talk about the soil type, kind of falls into this a little bit as well. So what you're looking at is kind of a neck down version of the data that comes out of here. So if you're looking at the very left column, at this right here, this is basically what you would get if you planted a plot at your house, and pretend that this is the column that comes out of there. Because what this is it's all this combined. It's not breaking out anything. It's just saying if I did 1 rep of these 40 hybrids, here's the order they're going to chuck out in. So what we're looking for, when we do this is stability, right? That's what you guys are after, is to get something that's somewhat stable, that performs on your acre. The rest of this is saying, okay, I may have an acre that I know I can't get into side dress. It's back tucked in the woods or whatever it is, or I know I've got to get my rotation back into play, so I'm going to have to go corn on corn with something. That's what this is telling us. The rest of this is saying, all right, let's take this set of data, and now let's break it out by every environment that we tested it out here. So this is first year corn, so this is the rotated stuff. Then we've got a block of corn on corn that's non-limited nitrogen, so we didn't limit the nitrogen at all on it, and it's high pop. Then we've got non-limited low pop. Then we've got these are the two. This is where I spend a fair amount of time walking, because I want to see where the stress, when we really stress something, what happens to it. So this is corn on corn, limited nitrogen high pop, limited nitrogen low pop. So this is kind of where we really start to separate things out. Then if you take it a step farther, we've got it by soil types and by yield environment. So what I want to call out here just real quick is, these I just picked, Tom and I did these. We picked 3 Croplan hybrids because we were familiar with them. We kind of knew we would get a result by using these. So, if you're looking at this, there's really no difference. It's 48.7 to 49.3. That's within the statistical error of this plot. So they're basically a wash. So you can't really go wrong by picking any of those. Here's where it starts to come into play, where the data that these guys have access to becomes important. Is now you're going to say, all right, I'm rotated acre, still all pretty much put together. We didn't do a whole lot to affect that or to change that up. As we start to get out in a little bit farther, this is where it starts to matter. 5678, for example, we've known since day one that it was a high nitrogen consumption hybrid. It really responds to that late season nitrogen. So if you put it in that limited nitrogen, it does what we expected it, right? It drops. It starts to build some separation. Here's another one. As we go to soil types, there's not a ton of coarse soil around here. This is just, kind of an example, but there is some. Look what 5335 does. When we take it onto this coarse soil, it separates itself from those other 3. So if you were making your decision off of this, but ended up on a coarse soil, did you do the right thing still by picking either of the 2 but 5335? Probably not. So what I want you guys to take out of this, so this is the really important part of that 2 or 3 minutes I spent on that, is that data is these huge piles of data. Why they're important is because it makes them a somewhat predictable tool. If you have one single plot, it really tells us what we should have done last year, right? But if we have enough data points going in there, it becomes a little bit more of a predictable tool to where we can say, all right, if I've got corn on corn or a coarse soil or a high pop or a low nitrogen environment, I can start to build the picture of what happens. Here's probably the second most important. If you're starting to dabble in the fungicide, if it's new to you, or if you're doing some in-season nitrogen, which is becoming more and more popular, and we're starting to figure out that it's really driving yield, now you can go in and pick a hybrid that says, I know I'm going to get a response out of this. This is not the 19.8. This is the 97.7. So I basically want you to hedge your bet and say, if I'm going to spend that extra dollar, let's make sure that you're getting as much of that dollar back as you possibly can. So the last thing I'll kind of touch on here, and call me out, Tom, if I skipped anything or missed anything, but is, we're talking genetics. You guys have all had the same issue. Todd and I came into this about the same time. We've heard this since we started. It's, if I bring you a product, what's the first thing next year when you ask for it again, what tends to happen sometimes? Or specifically that second or third year out. It's kind of irritating, right? But that's the world we live in. The fact that we're rolling products so much quicker is, are there negatives to it? There are. Are there great things that come with it? Yes, and it's called the genetic rate of gain. That's what's happening. But to take advantage of that genetic rate of gain, you have to have a trusted advisor that knows where to put it using a predictive tool, so you can take advantage of that genetic rate of gain earlier in its life cycle, preferably year one if possible. That doesn't always work out, but sometimes it does. You know, when we first started, Todd, how did we do it? We'd come out and sell somebody 16 bags, right? And then what'd they do next year? Say, hey, yeah, maybe I'll do 32 or 48, and then the next year, hey, give me 2 or 3 pallets, and we go, well, it's gone, sorry. You know, that unfortunately, and we're getting ready to go through the beans too, and I'm going to talk about beans here in just a minute. But the fact that these tools are somewhat predictive, that's really the important part of this, that you're able to take that and take advantage of the genetic rate of gain that we're getting earlier in the life cycle. So, Tom, did I miss anything on that part of it? I'll stop real quick and see if there's any questions or comments. It's I talked a little faster than I did up in Iowa apparently, but have you guys heard anything? I mean, is that something that makes sense to you guys? I think it's really important, and unfortunately, you know, it's what I am involved in every day, and it still takes me a lot of time to concentrate on it and know where that's going to end up as far as genetics go and how fast we're rolling. But from 2008 till today, we've essentially quadrupled the yearly genetic rate of gain. That's getting ready to ramp up even steeper with some of the new breeding assistant tools. So it's not going away. That's something that's going to continue to happen over and over, and it's not just Bayer. Bayer's really, really good at it. That DeKalb side, they know how to bring out germplasm. They know how to do trait integration. But Brevant's on the, you know, in the game now too with Corteva owning them. You know, NK has come a long way. Their breeding program and the fact that they own so many good traits, that's just going to keep snowballing. So with that, I'll transition just a little bit, and we're not going to spend a lot of time on beans, but I feel like it's the hot topic right now, but we've spent a lot of time on corn. But and what we're going to talk about is not the obvious part. You know, do I go enlist or do I go dicamba? That's not the portion that we're here. I'm not trying to tell you one way or another. What I want to touch on is kind of what happened when the fact that we had some new breeders entering the system. Some of them aren't new. Some of them have been around, they just weren't in the U.S. And some of them that were in the U.S. kind of had their pipeline maybe turned down a little bit because their ability to sell non-GMO or some straight Liberty or some straight Roundup, it just wasn't very profitable for them. But now that Enlist is in the market and it's opened up, you know, the market again, you know, now we've got freedom to operate on Roundups out there, the old Liberties out there, Enlist is obviously there, Flex, straight extend. There's a lot of different things, so a lot of different breeders have kind of cranked these pipelines back open. So what we went through on corn in the late 2000s and early teens, we're getting ready to go through in beans. That revolution that's happening, and the more people we get in that breeding world, I will tell you, is a good thing. Is it going to cause some heartache for a year or two? Us trying to kind of sort through all that, it is. But one of them I just want to touch on, just so you guys understand what's getting ready the volume of changes that could happen. Has anybody here heard of Don Mario, or Group Don Mario, GDM? So it's a breeding company out of South America, and to put it in perspective how big they are, in 2020, 30% of the world's harvested soybeans can be directly linked back to Don Mario germplasm. So you think about that. That's not in the U.S. You know, when we think about 30% of the market share in the U.S., that's big. That's about the biggest players. Is sometimes they end up in that 25 to 30% market share. But when you look at Don Mario, they have 30% market share globally. So they've got 5 breeding stations now in the U.S. and they're not alone. That's just the one. You know, when I heard that number, it's a staggering number. So I wanted to kind of set the tone with that's what's coming. There's several other ones, and I'm going to use GDM and the Syngenta breeding to kind of lump them together a little bit because they're both kind of going down the same path. Their model is growers make money off of germplasm. They make money off genetics, not traits, right? So their goal is to bring products to the market and then let us pick whether we want that set of germplasm in straight Liberty or Enlist or Flex or whatever it might be. So that's kind of a game changer versus what we've had in the past. And something, quite frankly, we're kind of looking forward to it from my seat, because it's really going to change the options that we've got going forward. And on top of that, that's new to the industry. You've still got Bayer, who rules the world in total germplasm pool that they can bring out. They're the best at the trait integration, so it's a big deal. It's these guys at Superior have access to all of that, and it really puts them and you guys in a good situation. It's just getting the understanding that there's going to be a lot of stuff coming, and having that trusted advisor. I know we've beat that to death today. You've heard it a lot, but having that trusted advisor that can get you into the germplasm earlier in its life cycle is super, super important. And I'll use a number to throw it out there just so you guys understand the sheer staggering numbers of what could happen. I asked a Bayer breeder. He was actually a Monsanto breeder at the time. He was the head breeder. I asked him how many different combinability. They said, we can roll through all this stuff. I asked a dumb question. I said, well, will you run out at some point? Are you going to run out of combinable options? And he kind of laughed, and Todd and Tom have heard me say this a dozen times, but so guess what the number of combinable options they've got just inside that Bayer breeding program is? Take a guess. It's you're going to be wrong, so that doesn't matter. Just throw a number out. It's a huge number. It's a 1 with 340 zeros behind it. That's the amount of options that they've got, and they're rolling through a lot of them, because there's literally tens of thousands of corn and soybean products that get rolled through there that you never see, that I never see. So it's going to get pretty hectic, as we go forward. Use these Superior guys. They've got access to all this information. Use the in-season data that we've got, to make in-season decisions, and don't be afraid to ask questions. That's what these guys are for. We've got all this data. We spend millions of dollars a year to generate this, and it is specifically for you guys to be able to make better decisions. So with that, we've got 3 minutes and 21 seconds left, so I'll open it up if there are any questions, or Todd or any Superior guys, if you've got any questions or want to add anything. Get the genetics placed correctly early in the cycle, and then take the fungicide, take the nitrogen information, add it to it. So.